Hello everyone, Halcylion here. Today I shall teach you all I know about optimizing the development of your character and becoming the ultimate Bannerlord to ever rule all of Calradia. Welcome to my leveling guide. Before we kick off this long ass video, let me give you some disclaimers. First of all, the character build presented today is my own idea of the ultimate Bannerlord, but mine is not the only truth, so to speak. The presented character setup is not meant for a short campaign or for role-playing. Some people want to role-play their characters and that's fine, but today's guide is about a very lengthy and detailed plan, spanning for hundreds of hours and possibly thousands of in-game days, for complete world domination. You will not stop when you conquer a castle or crown yourself king or emperor. Not even death will prevent you from bringing this plan to fruition. Boredom might, because this playstyle is not for everyone. If world domination is not your cup of tea, perhaps you'll still find some of the tips shared today useful. I sincerely hope that will be the case. Secondly, the perks we'll talk about today may change during the development of the game. It's still in early access and many things may be reworked or rebalanced, including most perks. But the skill and leveling system will most likely remain the same, and the tips you learn today may still be valid in the future. Disclaimer number 3. As you follow the plan, you will have to engage with every single aspect of the game. Trading, warfare, questing, smithing, and so on. Each of these is a massive subject which deserves its own separate guide. Just trading alone took almost an hour to explain across 2 separate videos, and I haven't even said everything there was to say about it. What I'm trying to say is that while we will briefly touch on all these subjects, I'm not going in depth about any of them. Not now. Today, we focus strictly on the leveling system. And finally, if you're one of the people who are like, man, I know all this stuff, why are you making a guide on it? Well, you'd be amazed at how many people don't know as much as we do. I always get questions like, how do you buy castles? Or why do you level up stewardship? Those are just 2 of the questions that shall be answered today. Without any more disclaiming, let us begin. The first thing you always do when you start a new game is creating your character and answering questions about your background, such as who were your parents, or what was your adolescence like, and what was the name of your first pet. I need that one answered for personal reasons. Each of these options will shape your character in different ways, which can either result in a character that's specialized on one thing but completely retarded at everything else, or in a jack of all trades who possesses surface level knowledge about all available skills while not being particularly great at anything, much like myself. While specializing your character from the moment of his conception sounds tempting, it's actually better to find the right balance of background options so that your initial focus points are nicely spread across multiple skills and ensuring that none of them are wasted. After you choose your path, you're free to specialize your character as you level up. I will not detail why I picked each of these background options. Instead, I will share with you my core philosophy. Initially, as I've said, I want my character to be a jack-of all trades. Then I want to focus on one main skill, which for this campaign will be, you guessed it, trade. It shall be taken to its maximum level of 275. I'm also going to dedicate some time to a couple of secondary skills. Stewardship and smithing, which are much better than most people give them credit for, including my past self. I will explain why this is the trio of skills I've chosen in due course. Finally, I shall also invest at least one focus point into random support skills such as scouting, tactics, or athletics. The reason I delegate them to the role of support skills is that they will support the development of our character and make him, her, or them level up faster. Unlike previous Mount and Blade games where mass murder was the only way to become a better person, in Bannerlord you can gain quite a few levels without committing a single act of violence against your fellow man, because the way you evolve your character is by leveling up your skills. Of course, there are skills which require you to bloody your hands, so if you want to unlock your full potential, you are going to have to at least feed some bandits their daily recommended dose of steel. The support skills speed up your progression because they're mostly increased passively, and you don't need to go out of your way to develop them. Scouting, for example, levels up as you cross difficult terrain or spot bandit hideouts. And if you have at least one focus point into that skill, it will increase much faster, at least for a while. Only for a while, you may ask, if you're new at this game. Let me elaborate how the whole leveling system works. In other games, you kill enemies, gain XP, level up, and put 1 point into strength, and suddenly, you're strong enough to wield a sword you found 10 hours ago. That's not how it works in Bannerlord. The skill system is a bit like in Skyrim, where you have to actually practice your skills in order to raise their level. For example, if you're forging a sword, you will botch it, but you'll eventually get better at smithing and the next sword you craft will be better. But the skill progression system goes much more in depth because skills are not developed at the same rate. Skills you ignore can be raised a little bit, and they will make a tiny contribution towards your next main level, but the way you speed up your primary, secondary, and support skills is by putting focus points into them and even raising their parent attribute. I need to explain how it all works by taking this puzzle apart and examining each of the pieces. So, you have 6 attributes and each of them governs over 3 skills. Putting points into one attribute will slightly raise the learning limit and learning rate on all of its subordinate skills. Since trade, smithing, and stewardship all belong to different attributes, I had to distribute points across all 3. I'll also be able to make use of the other skills belonging to these attributes without having to invest too many focus points into them. Since you only gain 1 attribute point every 4 levels, you have to mind where you spend them. My plan is to first take these 3 main attributes to level 5, and then put all the extra points I gain over time into social. Every time you level up, you also gain 1 focus point. At first, because you level up rather quickly, these will seem abundant, but that's not actually the case, and as such, you'll have to be careful where you put them. You can invest up to 5 focus points into any skill you like, and doing so greatly raises the learning speed and learning limit of that particular skill. But, and this is a big but, you don't want all of your skills maxed out. Ideally, you would, but since FPs are scarce, we'll have to be thoughtful about where we spend them. The only skill with 5 focus points will be trade, because it is the only one we need maximized. Our secondary skills will get 3 to 4 focus points, and our support skills will also get 1 to 2 focus points each. The other 2 pieces of this puzzle are the learning rate and learning limit of your skills. At first glance, these may seem self-explanatory, but again, there's some depth to it that I want to bring to the surface. As I've said, focus points and attributes influence these last 2 puzzle pieces. That becomes obvious if you just take one brief look at the skill page. Something less obvious is the fact that a skill doesn't stop progressing after hitting its learning limit. That's what I wrongly believed when I was new at the game, only to later realize that the skill can be developed well past that limit with one caveat. While a skill is within its limit, it will develop at maximum speed. When it surpasses the limit, its learning rate dramatically decreases, and development will slow each time the skill levels up, but it can still increase and contribute to your character's evolution. This only became obvious to me after I maximized social and trade on my main character and saw that the learning limit caps at 240, but there were still perks left to unlock well over that mark, so I decided to push forth. What I noticed is that after the limit is reached, the learning rate goes down, and each time you gain an extra level in that skill, this speed decreases even further. Going past the learning limit is not the only factor that slows down your progress. Children are famed for the speed with which they learn new things, but as we grow older, that aptitude diminishes little by little, and in their old age, some people can't even learn to perform the simplest of tasks. This also happens in the game because your character actually grows older as time goes by, but age or the passage of time are not what slow down progression. That actually happens every time you level up. In the early levels, your skills develop at an immense rate, but as you gain skill points and increase your main level, that rate severely goes down. To give a proper example, let's look at Meredith during various stages of her campaign. To clearly illustrate my point, we'll only look at her trade skill. At level 15, her skill is still within its learning limit and its learning rate is 8. That's huge! At level 19, she actually goes 10 points over the learning limit and the rate decreased to 5.52. And old age makes its effects known after 3 other levels are gained. Even though her trade skill barely increased by another 6, the learning rate is down to 4.63. So every time you gain a skill point, you take one step towards increasing your main level, but when the threshold is passed, it will become increasingly more difficult to gain your next skill points, especially if they have surpassed their learning limit. And if a skill and its attribute are completely ignored, its development actually stops shortly after it surpasses the limit. That's why I earlier said that some skills will only increase for a little while. This is why you must accept the fact that it's impossible to maximize all of your skills. At some point, they simply won't develop fast enough to gain you extra levels, and you won't earn enough focus points to increase another skill. I have no idea what the level cap is. I've beaten the game at level 22 back when trade was absolutely overpowered. But the level cap won't matter, because if you develop your skills correctly, you'll be a Divine Emperor before you even reach level 30. Now that you know all that, it's time to get into my system of leveling. First of all, during character creation, you must make sure no focus points are wasted. If, for example, I were to choose urban merchants as the answer to the question, who were your parents? I'd have gotten a total of 3 focus points into charm, and this skill is not particularly important. I chose Oasis Farmers instead, because combined with the other background options, it would offer much more balance to the initial character setup. Next step is realizing how many attribute and focus points we're going to earn, so we may form a plan on how to invest them into relevant skills. From my observations, character development goes like this. The first 10 levels are pretty easy to gain. From here, the next 6 are going to take a bit longer, but even so, level 16 should be achievable within a few years of game time. But earning another 4 levels to reach 20 is going to take quite a long time. However, as long as you stay on your grind, you will get it done. I personally consider level 20 the soft cap of leveling. After 20, because of all the factors mentioned earlier, everything is going to take longer, so good luck reaching level 30. I personally only plan for level 20 because that's all I really need to dominate this continent. As I've said, you could reach level 30, 40 or even 50. It's just going to take you a very long time. But leveling up and accumulating wealth is entirely worthless if you don't secure your dynasty. So take a good look at your age and then at the calendar and try to get married before you're 35 years old, otherwise you will have no heir to your empire and all of your efforts were for nothing. A genetic dead end. Now, I haven't personally reached this point myself because it takes an extremely long time, but I believe that after your first character passes away, all his progress and skills are automatically inherited by his children, and you will play as them throughout the ages. But even if that's not the case and progression resets, you will have achieved great things with your character. Anyway, back to leveling. Reaching level 20 is something you can surely achieve, and as such, you will earn 20 focus points and 5 attribute points to spend at your leisure. But your leisure is the least of my concerns because I'm here to teach you the most effective way to do it for maximum results. Since we have fewer attribute than focus points, we'll start with them. First attribute point takes social from 4 to 5, second does the same to endurance, and third goes into intelligence. The remaining 2 go back into social and take it to 7 out of 10. If you reach level 24 or even beyond, you've earned the right to spend the rest of your attribute points however you want. As for focus points, I'll shortly tell you my distribution. During the first 12 levels, we're mostly interested in developing the core of our character, after which you won't have to follow my progression to the letter. So here we go. The first focus point, which is already available to me the moment I start the campaign, goes into scouting. As I've said, scouting is a support skill, and as you travel difficult terrain or spot bandit hideouts, this focus point will speed up the development of your scouting ability, giving you some quick and easy skill points which will in turn help you advance your main level. In addition, the first 2 perks will slightly increase your map movement speed, so that's always nice. As soon as I reach level 2, I put my next focus point into stewardship. This is one of the most underrated skills in the game. I will elaborate why a bit later. Then, if I can afford it, I try to buy multiple types of food to actually level up this skill. Next focus point goes into polearm because early on, using a spear while mounted on a Midlands palfrey is a great way to solo smaller gangs of bandits, so I might as well speed up the development of my stabbing skill. The first perk is also nice to have. At level 4, I put 1 focus point into tactics. This doesn't do much on its own, but hopefully we'll be able to unlock the third perk. When it actually works, it's going to be a great addition to any conqueror's arsenal. As your recruit skill marauders, your tactics skill goes up. Same happens if you're faced with more enemies than you can handle. When you let your soldiers valiantly sacrifice their own lives to buy you time to escape, your tactics skill increases. As you fight bandits, you will inevitably take some of them prisoners and pawn them off to the nearest ransom broker for a small amount of coin. But more valuable than the money is your roguery skill, which goes up every time you ransom your captives, and we will briefly speed up its development by dumping 1 focus point into it the moment we reach level 5. With a few of our support skills set up, we turn our focus onto trade. The points you get at levels 6, 7 and 8 all go into trade to maximize the rate at which it develops. If you think 5 focus points are too much, you can feel free to only leave your main skill with 4 focus points and use the other anywhere you want. At level 9, it is time to pay attention to our secondary skills and put 1 focus point into stewardship to speed up its development. Level 10, we put a point into smithing, at 11 another into steward, and at 12 again in smithing. This is the core of your ultimate character, and for the most part, this is non-negotiable. All support skills have been given at least 1 focus point, our secondary skills both have 3 points, and our primary skill is maxed out as far as focus is concerned. From here, it's all a matter of preference. Because I mostly use one-handed weapons, at level 13 I put another point into this skill. If you prefer using two-handers, develop that skill instead. At level 14 I put 1 point in two-handers anyway because I want a perk. At level 15 I drop another focus point into archery, but if you'd rather use another type of ranged weapon, or no ranged weapon at all, use that focus point however you want. The points earned at levels 16 and 17 both go into athletics because I'd like to run faster on foot. I was going to put a second point into riding, but because of my high endurance I can reach level 60 in that skill without wasting any points. Why do I want riding level 60? Because I become able to ride a warhorse, and those are usually faster and tougher than normal horses. And when I reach level 18, I put a second focus point in tactics. Hopefully that's enough to unlock the one step ahead perk, but if it's not, I'll put a third focus point into it whenever I have the chance. As for levels 19 and 20, feel free to use those focus points however you want. I personally put one of them into athletics and another in one-handed, but if some support skill has ceased development and you'd like to continue its contribution towards your main level, you can bump up its learning limit. As I've said, skills without focus points and undeveloped attributes just stop increasing altogether shortly after reaching their limit. After you're level 20, you can use focus points however you want. I'd personally maximize stewardship, so I may get access to this perk, but as I've already mentioned, perks may be reworked, so you never know. Smithing is also good to maximize because it can be an excellent way to make money in conjunction with trade. But if you'd rather develop your combat proficiencies, well, feel free. This is your character. As long as your core is well developed, you can deviate from this guide however you want and you'll get the same results. Now that you know where to spend your focus points, let's take each skill and analyze why they are important to our character. I may also have a few tips and tricks about how to raise each of them. We'll start with trade because I get these messages all the time. Why do you trade? You can raid lords and sell their armor for lots of money, or I make a sword and sell it for 80,000 dinars. Both of those are viable ways to make money, and I acknowledge that. There's so many good ways to make bank in this game, I'm not even going to list them all. Getting money is not the issue. Spending them is. Trade, at its base, allows you to make more profit when you buy stuff from one place and sell it to another. Some of its perks are also good if you operate caravans. This is one of my favorites, but the only perk that is a complete game changer is
everything has a price.
And prior to patch 1.3, this perk was an absolute game breaker, because if you were to grind your trade skill to level 225 and unlocked this perk, you could just barter with a lord and buy a town for less than half a mil. The taxes from this town and its villages, as well as the money you'd passively gain from your workshops and caravans, would earn you 10,000 dinars per day, and you could just wait a week, search for another lord, and buy another castle. Your property list would grow, you'd gain more taxes, more passive income, find lords, buy their castles, wait some more, and do the same with every single land-owning nobleman, and within a couple of years, the entire map would be yours. And you would earn 250,000 dinars every day without a care in the world. Eventually, factions would declare war, even though they willingly sold all of their land to you, and to negotiate peace, you would have to surrender a few towns or castles, or pay their value in gold, about 100k. You could make peace with an entire kingdom for half of your daily income. Eventually, they would be unable to hire more recruits, and most factions just faded out of existence, but after patch 1.3, things have changed, and now a town would cost 2 million dinars, if not more, to purchase. And if someone declares war on you, you better have 6 million dinars handy, or just be willing to surrender the towns you rightfully purchased. Back then, that was an extremely overpowered playstyle, and I'm glad it got nerfed, but I'm also glad I got to experience just how overpowered it was. Now, every time someone tries to tell me they have a better way of earning money in this game, all I gotta do is show them this save game. Anyway, the reason we want this perk is not to buy castles, at least not yet, but to sell them. When you advance, you can start harassing a faction you don't really care about, besiege their castles, and sell your conquests to some faction you like. But if we want to buy castles, we now have that option. And if you do so, you also get the entire garrison for free. That is the sole reason we grind the trade skill. But trading is also a very easy way of gaining skill points to level up, and this is what we want for the most part, at least in the early game. If you don't want to bother with trade at all, your other alternative of making money is the roguery skill. As your level in this aptitude increases, you'll find more loot after battles or when raiding villages. But since the ultimate Bannerlord is not some sneaky rat, the sole reason we put 1 point in here is to get some free skill points and boost our level when inevitably selling prisoners of war. In the late game, after we have the ability to purchase castles, we need a solid moneymaker. Trading is nice, but at the moment, nothing compares to the sheer joy you feel when you craft a shitty weapon and sell it for 70,000 dinars. Honestly, this feels way too overpowered, and I think weapon prices will get nerfed in the future. I mean, 70k for a piece of sharp steel attached to a long stick? Weapons and armors should not be that expensive. But in the game's current state, after your smithing skill develops, you may unlock certain weapon parts that sell like crazy. And while this is not a smithing guide, I recommend you ignore these iron making and steel making perks and instead choose the ones that will unlock new weapon parts. But how will I forge steel to craft weapons, you may wonder? You won't. You will instead find weapons which can be smelted into any type of steel and then repurposed into a sword that sells for an insane amount of money. With enough skill, you may even craft weapons that are good enough for personal use. The skill points you'll get from developing this aptitude will also greatly contribute to your main level. In fact, on my main character, I don't think I'd have reached level 22 without spending some time at the forge. From what I've seen, crafting weapons which are way above your skill level is a good way of developing your smithing aptitude. I also have a lot to say about stewardship. I earlier called it the most underrated skill because at first glance it's completely worthless. But if you stick with it just a little bit, you'll see that this is one of the most useful skills to have in the game. First thing you need to do is spend about 500 gold on various foods to get this food variety bonus, which increases the morale of your troops. And if you have the bonus active, your stewardship skill will rapidly increase. As that happens, if you just look at its description, you'll see that a high steward skill allows you to hire more soldiers. Later on, when you'll be leading massive armies, this stewardship bonus will be of great help and you'll be grateful to have invested some focus points into it. Secondly, as I've repeatedly said, leveling up skills raises your main level as well. On my current test run, most of the levels I've gained were the result of my stewardship skill increasing. Granted, it wasn't the only skill contributing to my character's development, but it was the one that pushed me to the next level again and again. Now you understand why stewardship is an amazing skill. Other skills that passively increase are scouting, which I've already talked about, tactics, which I've already talked about, as well as medicine. There's nothing you can actively do to increase your med skill. It automatically levels up as you see the anatomy of your soldiers through the wounds they receive in combat, and as you heal your wounded troops after battles. I've noticed that if you rest in a town, your soldiers heal faster, and that may lead to a quicker development of your medical expertise. The first perk in this skill is also quite amazing. 10% extra health may help you survive a javelin to your torso, provided you're wearing heavy armor, and that could be the difference between victory and defeat, because if the commander falls, his troops become disorganized. That's why you should keep yourself alive in every battle. Depending on your method of transportation, riding and athletics will increase passively as you walk around the map, but you may also develop them actively as you fight enemies both on horseback and on foot. I personally like using both, riding because I want to be mounted on a warhorse in field battles, and athletics because I like running fast in sieges and tournaments. But if I were to play favorites, I'd stick with athletics because your horse can often be unreliable. The key to speeding up the progress of these skills is this relative movement speed, which is at its peak when you strike an enemy as you run towards him at full speed. Thing is, if an enemy runs away from you, your relative movement speed will be lower, and if they run towards you, it will be higher. I've found that making looters shit their pants and run away from combat is the best way to train both of these movement skills. If you're on a mount, run them down. If you're on foot, well, you're gonna have to be on a mount, right in front of them, dismount, and then charge at them with your weapon as they make their escape. They will run from your soldiers and into your weapon, helping you train your athletic skill. As for your combat skills, both ranged and melee, you only train them by using the appropriate weapons. Some swords allow you to switch the grip and can be used both with one hand or with two hands, and you can alternate what you train. And if you prefer ranged combat, try to land headshots from very far away. That's the best way to train your marksmanship. And I've also made the observation that your combat skills develop faster when you actually land killing blows on your foes. Engineering is a skill I haven't touched on. From my limited experience, I would say the best way to train it is by building city projects or siege engines, and as it levels up, it will speed up the construction on both those things. I don't know, just like in Warband, I usually try to find a companion that is good at engineering and make use of his skill instead of developing my own. The two skills which are actually difficult to raise, despite being very useful, are Charm and Leadership. This wasn't the case with Charm. Used to be you could just talk to some noble, give him 1 coin and you would gain 2 skill points in Charm. Now, you actually need to improve your relations with people. Political decisions, rushing to the aid of both lords and peasants, completing quests, those are just a few of the ways you have of developing Charm. And you should take some time to level it up because it has some important perks, such as this one which gives you better prices when trading fiefs. 15% off may not sound like much, but we're talking millions here. Leadership is not very useful on its own, but its current perks are quite nice to have. Unfortunately, you only have 2 ways to raise this skill. The first one is to keep the morale of your troops above 75, as well as leading massive armies. The first method never worked for me. I would win 10 fights consecutively, I'd have my morale at 70, then I wouldn't find enemies for 3 days straight and morale went down, resulting in 0 points of leadership gained. But when I assembled my first army, I earned more leadership skills in 1 day than I ever got in all the previous 10 years, so it was great. I've also noticed you gain a small amount of leadership XP when you recruit volunteers from villages, but it's too inconsistent to be a reliable method of leveling up your skill. Anyway, that's pretty much everything you needed to know about the leveling system of Mountain Blade Bannerlord. Maybe everything I said is something you already knew, but if you learned something new today, maybe you can help my channel level up by leaving a like on this video. But it ain't over yet. Before I depart, I want to leave you with an outline on how to structure your next campaign, if you want to try your hand at this whole world domination thing. This is my plan for my upcoming campaign, which I may do during a live stream or in my own time, we'll see. In the early game, I simply stick to trading and try to increase that skill. During the first few weeks, I tend not to upgrade the 20 soldiers in my party, because if I'm faced with a large group of bandits, I want to sacrifice some of my troops to increase my tactics skill. Cowardly, dishonorable, and highly effective. But it's not all doom and gloom for my soldiers, because during their short lives, they enjoy the finest food this world has to offer, but don't think I do that out of the kindness of my own heart. It's actually done to develop my stewardship. Anyway, my main concern right now is making money, levels, and renown. Once I have a fair amount of all 3, I start investing into workshops and caravans, and I also upgrade my convoy with saddle horses and trained soldiers, and I tend to keep a close eye on my investments. If one of my caravans is under attack, I try to rush to its aid. Ideally, I would have a group of 20 paladin guards and use them to clear some bandit hideouts to make the world a safer place for my caravans. I'd rather not lose my investments before I got a return. In the mid-game, I have 3 main goals. Number 1, increase trade to level 225 and unlock the ability to barter estates with nobles. Number 2, get 1 million denars. Number 3, develop my smithing skills to craft weapons that sell for insane amounts. To do this, I tend to hoard weapons I get from the bandits I kill, because I can smelt them and get smithing materials, in addition to learning how to craft new weapon parts, some of which fetch vast amounts of coin. The seax is especially nice, since it can be smelted into steel. But I have more to achieve than those 3 goals. Building relations with noblemen and notables is also something I focus on, because I can recruit them into my kingdom, in addition to gaining levels in charm. Also, getting married is something I try to accomplish before the age of 35, but unlike in real life, seducing the ladies of Calradia isn't too complicated, so it's nothing I need to be overly worried about. The final thing I pay attention to during mid-game is training my troops so I won't be stuck with useless recruits. There's heavy fighting ahead of us in the future. Before transitioning to late game, you can feel free to experience life as the vassal to one of the kings of Calradia and earn a name for yourself, as well as a lot of influence. Be sure you grab this perk before pledging your sword to their cause, because you're sure to make some enemies. If you don't want to be tied down to any faction, you can enlist as a mercenary and earn influence that way. And if you choose that route, you're free to leave whenever you want. No strings attached. Then, in the first stages of late game, I use my skills, money and influence to purchase a town. If that's too expensive, I buy a castle next to a town I want, and I spend some time in there, fully devoted to my new blacksmithing hobby. I go to town, make some charcoal, smelt some weapons and forge some others, in an attempt to learn expensive weapon parts. After exhausting yourself at the forge, you'll need to regain your stamina by resting in a town. I wish the stamina passively regenerated as I traveled the world, but waiting is the only thing we can do right now. If you have this perk in the stewardship tree, you should actually go to your own castle and wait in there, while you passively increase the prosperity of your own fief. When you unlock some expensive weapon part, that will be your main moneymaker. From this point on, trading is done solely to raise the skill and unlock new perks. The final perk raises your party limit by 15 troops, which combined with other skills and kingdom policies, allows you to field a small army which can lay waste to any castle or town, without having you rely on your vassals. At this point, I will of course build some projects in my castle to ensure its prosperity. Owning a fief also comes with the benefit of allowing you to station some of your troops in its garrison and swap your army composition to your desire. You can leave the experienced troops home and train some recruits, or you can leave your infantry behind and ride out with your cavalry. Being able to do whatever the hell you want is great, and the castle allows that. In addition, you're also allowed to stockpile gear, resources and even mounts in your personal stash, which adds to your versatility. Maybe you bought a lot of horses but you find out they slow you down and you don't want to sell them yet, so you can just put them in the stable of your castle. After you've accomplished these goals, you have several ways to go from here. You can either join some faction you like, assemble the dragon banner and give it to your king, or assemble the dragon banner for yourself and recruit some lords to join your new kingdom and prepare for the fight of your lives, because you'll go to war on multiple fronts. You can of course just make lots of money and buy castles and towns and raise your empire that way, but don't expand too rapidly or you'll get attacked by all factions at once, losing your investments. Whatever you do, make sure you have good relations with lords and convince them to join your cause. The fastest way to improve those relations is through violence. Crush an enemy lord's army, and when he surrenders, simply let him go. That's how you make friends in Calradia. And if you're a king and you start besieging castles all by yourself, you can sell them to your lords instead of gifting them. That's what I do to make lots of money in the end game. Anyway, when you're running your own kingdom or empire, depending on what choices you've made with the dragon banner, you might be tempted to start chopping off the heads of anyone who opposes you. That's one way to secure the throne, but the other is to just let your enemies go free and eventually recruit them to your cause. You need the help of other lords to run your empire, because if you do it solo, you'll run it into the ground. Then again, maybe you want to be king of the ashes. I merely showed you how to mold your character so that he or she may achieve any goals you have. What those goals are is up to you. Before we bring this guide to an end, I have several random tips to share. When we talked about character creation, we haven't mentioned the culture of the ultimate Bannerlord. That's because cultural bonuses are all situational. Khuzaits, Sturgeons and Battanians give you mobility under certain circumstances, Vlandians have rapid troop development, the Aserai have an extremely easy early game as traders, and the Imperials have the strongest late game because of the speed with which they can build siege engines. You can pick whichever faction you want, whether for role-playing or for min-maxing your character to be better at one of those things. But if you choose Imperial, you should go the extra mile and try to develop your engineering skill as well, because it helps you seize castles faster, and if you play as I recommend, you'll make tons of money as you siege, and then immediately sell your conquest to the first buyer. Holding castles can get very expensive and you don't want that until you're ready for war. As I was experimenting, I noticed that using siege weapons increases your archery and athletics skills very fast. One trick you can use to improve the morale of your soldiers and boost your leadership skill is to take them to a tavern and talk to the tavern maid twice. You then have the option of paying 1000 dinars for a temporary morale bonus of 2. Also, the newest 1.4.1 patch, which just released as I'm finishing this video, changed a lot of things, most notably the perks in the one-handed skill tree. These perks now give you their regular weapon bonuses and also some troop bonuses as well. At the moment, two-handed and polearm can't even compare in utility to the one-handed skill tree, but I reckon that upcoming patches will improve and rework all skills and perks, just as I've said in the beginning. And most importantly, you have 10 in-game years to assemble the dragon banner and create your own kingdom, so try to get yourself established before that time comes. Earn money, make friends, and get married, because when war is at your doorstep, you will have no time for anything else. Well, there may be more to say about this subject, but that's all I had for today. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, make sure you do whatever you want to do. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.